Promenade from Gallaktion, Eshmakishvili. Chapter 1. Except from my travel diary. It was a cold winter morning. Unable to sleep, I had decided to surrender my sorrows to the darkness and solitude, companions that were becoming more and more frequent in my wanderings. However, far from regretting it, I had been learning to love them like sisters, a learning that, for better or for worse, would prove to be one of the most useful in my entire brief existence. I was crossing the ancient Charles Bridge, which in other happier times would have certainly left me amazed, but at this point only made me yawn and boredom, without knowing where I wanted to go, until I instinctively stopped my pace to contemplate the cold, murky waters of the Vitava River. Foolishly, perhaps, deep in my heart, I hoped that the river could tell me something, even though I had already been deceived by the Tietê, the Bac and the Kura, and had already lost hope that series of trips would bring me the oblivion for which I had so much desired. The truth is that I would like to return to my country and live the rest of my life like a hermit, atoning for my sins before a God whose ears have closed before my prayers. Tomorrow I'll buy a ticket back home and put an end to this fruitless search, I ruminated, in silence and completely alone in the parapet of the bridge. And it was then that I heard for the third time that whisper, the same whisper that had pierced my ears with a note of malevolent irony in the night I spent drinking until I got drunk at the Fascinator. And while I gazed at the portrait of the Countess in the castle, which I had so much similarity with my longing and ghostly beloved, that voice, female, disembodied, that no one else but me seemed to hear, that came from some dark corner of my mind about to flow, or perhaps in the Rhine sent to torture me. That with just one word left me, with my hair on the edge. Fools, these words, always uttered in a tone of cruel interrogation, seemed to sarcastically remind me of my state of mind since I left. Havilalus. For the third time I turned around looking for my invisible interlocutor. It left me even more scared than relieved. I saw that she had finally shown up. The strange voice did not belong to any supernatural being, or at least that's what I thought it seemed. But rather a small girl of about 12 or 13 years old, dressed in amorphous black clothes that gave her an androgynous appearance. Her hair, also black, was short and gracefully curled, like that of some Baroque fallen angel, and despite the darkness, her glacial, almost unnatural white skin stood out with a will-o'-the-wisp luminosity. Apart from her eyes, which emitted a malevolent and predatory glow under the moonlight, I could discern nothing of her face then. Before the last shred of courage left my body, I finally tried to question that child, or better said, that apparition. So she finally showed up, demon. I am not already disturbed enough by your lackeys, who come in squads to harass me, both when I am awake and when I am asleep. And now here you are in person trying to deprive me of even the smallest moment of peace. Who are you? What are you? Who pricks my conscience since my arrival in this country? Until then I was a stranger to me, seeming to know not only me but the fatal secret that I carry in my core. Why? The little girl replied to me with a crystal clear and harmonious voice, marked by an accent that comes from one of the glacial lands of Thule, but a bit serious and with certain notes of contempt and irony, things so unusual in a child with that age. I thought it was a little more perceptive. If you were in your right mind, you wouldn't confuse me. Who can give you the peace you so desire with the cause of your evils? Not only I seem to know him, I know him. I've known him since he caught my attention on that dawn that almost was as freezing as this one, when he sought to see death for the first time, disturbed, incoherent, haunted by a name, at the top of Viados do Chá, in the bowels of his own homeland, for which it is just another discontent worm gnawing at them in the midst of so many other worms. And I tried to investigate it. Without knowing it, it smelled every trace of you throughout the lands where you traced your path of misery. I saw firsthand the pool of blood in your unholy wedding bed. I was present when they removed the corpse of a woman from the bottom of the cooler girl. Empusa, Eli. Empusa, Eli, I screamed in a paroxysm of hatred and in a futile attempt to deceive myself about what most likely was in fact true. Yet another for my growing collection of deceptions. By way of evidence, the girl put a small hand into one of the pockets of my heavy black cloak she was wearing and pulled out a terrible-looking piece of paper, mutilated and salted with water. Handing it to me, her evil smile seemed to widen greatly. "I hope this convinces you otherwise," she said, scathingly. Trembling, I slowly unfolded the battered paper. Even though it was stained and obliterated in several parts, and I wanted to forge in my brain something convincing lie that would excuse my guilt, I recognized parts of my rough Russian handwriting. It was the poem I had given to Zarima on the day I left her arms. I avoided it, denying myself a possible life of joy, because I simply thought I did not deserve it. Filled with tears, my eyes widened. From there, it was easy to inquire about his whereabouts. Continued the cruel figure with the contours of a girl. After all, how many foreigners like you, from lush tropical lands, are found in these parts? Even more so those prone to desecrate in the early hours with their circumlocutions, when the good man sleeps the sleep of the righteous. From the Caucasus I went to look for him in Lithuania, and from there they pointed me to the Prussian tomb. Don't you remember that night when we got there? I immediately remembered that indigestible chill, that pang of foreboding that I felt as soon as the kind farmer gave me his arms, so I could get off his cart after our long days of journey crossing the Lithuanian border with the Kaliningrad Oblast, and that he almost made me throw me at his feet, begging him to let me share his rustic abode, planting potatoes for the rest of my life, and without ever thinking about writing any line of verse or prose whatsoever. If he had been fast enough, he would have seen me, although the time for our inevitable meeting had not yet arrived. From then on, I was in her faithful shadow, always at his heels, waiting until I was mentally strengthened for the great revelation that was entrusted to me. And whether you like it or not, today is the day when you will be allowed to hear from my own mouth what you need before the pit in your soul devours you once and for all. But what I'd be devoured anyway? I asked, my petulance fighting against my fear and at least momentarily overcoming it. Where were you when you needed and deserved someone's concern? If I seek to do what I do, it is because it is my destiny. Perhaps. Perhaps. But it's not now that it's about to be fulfilled. You need to finish your wanderings as you planned them, after all. You speak as if I intended to throw myself out there. Without prudery, however, I confess to my indulgent reader that I have not failed to consider such a possibility, even if for a fraction of the second. Let me guess, are you the angel of death? He came to block my departure because God forbade him to take me until I suffer even more. She left. As much as the angel of death and I are very good friends, I have nothing supernatural. I'm just a mere girl who, by grace or perhaps punishment, was fated to know too much and be interested in people like you. Why don't you give me a friendly handshake so we can celebrate our blossoming friendship. You will feel that I am real. And she extended her tiny hand to me. I tried to uncover any and all acts of malice behind that innocuous gesture, but there seemed to be nothing. The girl continued impassively with her hand outstretched, and for now I was afraid of contradicting her. I timidly held her fingers, squeezing them slowly. It made me remember the dark pages of Gothic novels that I had read. Those old stories of specters, apparitions, potents, exuding a bittersweet scent of putrefaction, with which I had filled my weary brain. I removed my hand from hers hastily, staring at her with a mixture of curiosity and pure disgust. Her only response was to laugh at me again. Is my touch strange, Southern man? I immediately offer you an explanation that is rational enough for your tastes. I come from a land where Boreas is king, and therefore winter is permanent. Polar bears are our adorable pets, and the lack of sunlight is compensated by the beautiful spectacle of the northern lights. I am a native of Spitsbergen, a small but no less beautiful jewel in the Arctic crown. But there is no father or mother who raised me. As far as I know, I am the daughter by parthenogenesis of a splinter of a target and altar, Newton Topen, and I was nicknamed Anastasia. They call me Gallaktion, I replied, still suspicious. And why don't you introduce yourself as? After all, it's the name your parents gave you, Anastasia Hart. I froze once again because that being knew so much about me, spent years chasing me without me knowing, but I quickly regained my composure and asked him, and who named her Anastasia? And what made you leave your inhospitable ice fortress to pursue me? Me? I don't even know who you are, and I don't owe you anything. You carry your cross and I carry mine, was what she replied in a sour tone of voice. I can't talk about what you weren't allowed to understand. Isn't it cold bad for your complexion? I got used to the cold. I carry it inside me. It may be so, but I still must tell you that you must hear, and I would not like to be here, both exposed to the unaware ears of darkness. I insist that you accompany me to my home, a good fireplace and perhaps a warm drink do you some good. I'm staying on Hua. It is close to here, and we won't need to walk that far. Was not so far away, after the strong emotions that struck me all once throughout that morning, I had become unwilling to continue wandering in the streets at such a hostile time. As much as I still feared that unknown being who had manifested himself to me in the form of a girl, I hesitated to consider her a flesh and blood human being, given the circumstance. It could be that, in fact, hearing what had the saying would bring me any positive consequences whatsoever. Not only that, I felt that our fates were interconnected in some way, where could be good or could be bad, and it would be difficult to let go of Anastasia from then on. I let her guide me to her residence and followed in her wake, her black robes billowing in the wind in a particularly spectral way. In a matter of minutes we arrived at a picturesque ruin, lined with charming little houses built in the typical Central European fashion. I felt a slight joy, because it seemed like I had gone back a century in the past, and as soon as I could, I would thank Anastasia for introducing me to such a beautiful place. Even more beautiful immersed in the dark, lit by gas lamps. At least she had a good aesthetic taste, I thought to myself, but my inner monologues were interrupted when we arrived at her home. Taking an old silver key from the cloak, in which there seemed to be an infinite number of pockets, she unlocked the wooden door and guided me inside. I fearfully crossed the threshold thinking that some chimera would emerge from a hidden room and attack me, or even that the girl herself would metamorphose into said chimera. What looked more like an art gallery than a house itself. The first thing I noticed was that, for some inexplicable reason, the house seemed to be bigger on the inside than on the outside. Not that I had seen the inside of one of those houses before, but how the place managed to hold such an extensive collection of objects. The house seemed to be bigger on the inside than from the outside. Not that I had seen the inside of one of those houses before, but how the place managed to hold such an extensive collection of objects d'art was something that went beyond my understanding. Everywhere I looked, there was a profusion of statues, large and small, of men, women, and deities, both from the Greco-Roman pantheon and from Anastasia's own lands, which were so realistic and well proportioned that I thought they might awaken from their stony sleep at any time so that they could interact with me, just like Galatea's Vetiviva. The walls were adorned with beautiful paintings and drawings of landscapes, of people that I didn't recognize, and historical and mythological scenes. So as not to deviate too much from my objective. However, to complement all the sumptuousness of the place, there was also very fine furniture, vases with enchanting multicolored flowers, shelves overflowing with books, and a large fireplace. Do you like my work? It took me a lifetime to produce it, Anastasia told me with a note of pride in her voice. As she took off that cloak, revealing beneath her prepubescent child's silhouette outlined in a fine black knitted fabric, I was finally able to admire her facial features. And I fear her even more than when I couldn't see them. Anastasia was graceful, had a snub nose, and her porcelain skin. However, her eyes scared me. Those huge, round-like brown eyes sparkled as if they had knew some secrets.
In a matter of minutes, we arrived at the picturesque street, lined with charming little houses built in the typical Central European fashion. I felt some slight joy because it seemed like I had gone back a century in the past. And as soon as I could, I would thank Anastasia for introducing me to such a beautiful place. Even more beautiful, immersed in the dark, lit by gas lamps. At least she had good aesthetic taste, I thought to myself. But my inner monologues were interrupted when we arrived at her home. Taking an old silver key from that cloak in which there seemed to be an infinite number of pockets, she unlocked the wooden door and guided me inside. I fearfully crossed the threshold, thinking that some chimera would emerge from a hidden room and attack me, or even that the girl herself would metamorphose into said chimera. Instead, I was treated to what looked more like an art gallery than a house itself. The first thing I noticed was that for some unexplainable reason the house seemed to be bigger on the inside than on the outside. Not that I had seen the inside of one of those houses before, but how the place managed to hold such an extensive collection of objets d'art was something that went beyond my understanding. Everywhere I looked, there was a profusion of statues, both big and small, of men, women, and deities, both from the Greek-Roman pantheon and from Anastasia's own lands, which were so realistic and well-proportioned that I thought they might awaken from their stony slumber at any time, so that they could interact with me just like revived Galateas. The walls were adorned with beautiful paintings and drawings of landscapes, people that I didn't recognize, and historical and mythological scenes. Unfortunately, I cannot list them in detail for the reader so as not to deviate too much from my purpose. However, to complement all the sumptuousness of the place, there was also very fine furniture, vases with enchanting multicolored flowers, shelves overflowing with books, and a large fireplace. feared her even more than when I couldn't see them. Anastasia was graceful, had a snub nose, and her porcelain white skin looked as if it would break if touched roughly by unworthy human hands. However, her eyes scared me. Those huge, round, light brown eyes sparkled as if they knew some secret of great importance that they longed to share. They were the eyes of an owl, the very same copied eyes of Minerva in the Homeric verse. It was almost as if she could plumb the depths of my soul with them. And maybe she really could. Are you telling me that all these paintings and sculptures are yours? I couldn't help but express my doubts. I had already heard of several child prodigies, and modesty aside, I myself was considered one of them given the good education I received from my parents, the only demonstration of genuine affection given to me by them. But it wasn't possible for that girl, who had barely completed a decade of life, having to her name an artistic production of such scope. How old are you? Older than I seem, actually, was her reply given in a mocking tone. You know this isn't my true form, huh? Nor will this be our last meeting. I warn you in advance that we will see each other twice more, and on the third, you and me will be united in marriage. And why would I want anything and everything with someone like you? I got angry at such petulance. Is it really in my destiny to live? To live but to serve as a lackey of Erictho? Why don't you go back to the Tartarus from whence you came? I regret having listened to you. I am out of here. Such things are very different from what you will tell me the next time, she commented, her huge eyes sparkling with a hateful shine. Can I at least know where and when it will be? There. With a hideous smile, she pointed to one of her paintings, which I hadn't noticed until then. It was a truly dismal and desolate landscape, lurid tones of black, gray, and purple. It represented a desert valley. A huge round moon silvered the abundant sandy dunes and rocks. In the center of the valley, there was a bizarre statue of an angel in unique military attire. A furious and avenging Archangel Michael, dressed in all of his warlike splendor. He had a huge trumpet in his hands, raising it to his lips with a fierce expression. As much as that image had made me so uncomfortable, I rejected it as an invention of that strange girl to whom I had already grown tired of listening. But at the time I couldn't even imagine that, in fact, our second rendezvous would take place at the exact time, place, and in the most dire of circumstances, just as she had described it. Where is this monument located? I asked, as soon as my emotions calmed down. Don't you think it would be more enjoyable to wait and find out on your own? Anastasia replied. I guarantee it'll be a fun encounter, however. At the feet of the avenging angel, you will say you love me as much as you now say you hate me. what about the third meeting? It will be even better. You don't intend to tell me where and when it will happen either, do you? Her only response was to raise one of her eyebrows, thin and arched like two question marks, with a condescending smile, as if she had been asked a question that greatly insulted her intelligence. I chose not to anger her and didn't bring up the subject again. Probing more closely all those paintings, another one piqued my interest due to its simplicity, in contrast to the sublime themes of the others. A sunny beach with a beautiful blue sea in the background. A germ of happiness sprouted in my chest upon seeing it, and I almost thought of including it in my itinerary. I would be happier if we met on this beach, I said, trying to have a modicum of humor. Do you know where it is located, or did you make it up yourself? You will visit this beach too, not before suffering even more and losing everyone you love to death. You shall make this journey much older and alone. Who knows? You'll find the one you've been waiting for. Who? She once again raised her eyebrow, this time looking slightly irritated. I myself ended up realizing my stupidity. After all, there was only one person I was waiting for. The same person who had made me embark on these pilgrimages, thinking in vain that I would forget her. This very same stupidity causing me to lose her. My eyes widened, I broke into a cold sweat, and I felt as if I had swallowed a huge lead weight that plummeted straight into my stomach. Everything and everyone, till then, just wanted me to remember her. But she... I started to stutter, but Anastasia interrupted me with a quick gesture of her hand. Yes, priest. From what I see, her patience is not one of her best attributes. Spira, it's spira. Even the longest journey began with a single step. Such motivational words sound more like sarcasms coming out of her mouth, I replied. She just shrugged. Well then, if you have already admired my work enough, let's sit down. There is still a lot left to say, and I need, as much as you, to rest my legs and drink something invigorating. I already asked Savitri in advance to bring us some good coffee, which only she knows how to prepare. Who's Savitri? In layman's terms, I would say she's my handmaiden, but that word doesn't do justice to the relationship we have. As much as she has agreed to serve as my great helper in everything I do, we are more than just respective maid and patroness. I believe she will come with our drinks very soon. I insist once again. Let's sit down, yes? And she guided me to an elegant living room as richly decorated as the rest of the house, sitting in a huge soft armchair that made her look even smaller and childlike. As for me, I I sat facing her on a comfortable chaise longue that, being so wide, could almost serve as a small bed. Soon, a female voice in Norwegian called out from some distant room. It could only be Anastasia's handmaid, obviously. I thought to myself. Immediately, a beautiful girl who had barely turned 20 came to meet us. Her straight black hair and dark skin, complementing her name, revealed her Indian ancestry. She was, however, wearing a typical Scandinavian outfit that I found out of place. She carried a tray with 2 cups and a teapot, which she placed carefully on a small table that separated Anastasia from me. The two of them then started talking to each other in Norwegian, and except for one or another term that I thought expressed affection, I learned nothing. Ending the dialogue, Anastasia gave Savitri a strong and affectionate hug, laughing. Of all the strange things I had been bombarded with since that girl showed up, that was the one that left me most amazed. For the very first time, that child acted like what she was, or at least appeared to be. A child. Savitri then turned to me and gave me a polite smile with her white teeth. I noticed that one of her eyelids didn't open up completely, giving her the somewhat gloomy appearance of a broken doll. Her good eye, however, was of a poetic raven black color that would make the most beautiful of our Irasemas envious. "It's so good to have a visitor," she told me in English punctuated by a slight Indian accent. "Even more from a place as beautiful as Brazil. I am happy to be here," I lied, somewhat embarrassed by the Indian's optimism, so contrasting with that of her young master. If I had met her before, perhaps I would have been able to put up with Anastasia with more patience, I thought. "My nanny and I have already visited it, you know. How busy the city of Sao Paulo is. It has a sad appearance, but it is still so beautiful. I really hope we can go back one day." And she gave a pleading look at Anastasia, who just responded with a bizarrely maternal smile. "I hope so too," I replied with a nervous chill. "I know that you and my mistress have matters to discuss, so I will not bother you any further. However, I hope we can see each other again as soon as possible. Have you visited India, foreigner?" "Unfortunately not. I hope you can do it one day. Sometimes I miss my homeland, but I think it was better that I left after all. Fru Anastasia has been very good to me since she took me under her wings. I'm sure she's... Okay, I will leave you alone." After exchanging a few more brief words in Norwegian with Anastasia, she gave her a kiss on the forehead, went upstairs to the upper floor, and we never saw her again. "Savitri hails from our former colony of Dronkevar," Anastasia explained. "I helped her in a moment of difficulty, and she has since joined me of her own free there anyone who will know more than that? You. I swallowed hard. I don't know if I should consider that good or bad. She ignored my speech. Taking the teapot from the tray Savita had handed us, she filled one cup for herself and the other one for me. The strong smell of coffee filled my nostrils, but an uncomfortable inner voice screamed in my ears, telling me not to taste that beverage, which was most likely adulterated. But I dared to risk a sip when I saw that Anastasia was drinking from her cup with so much gusto. It was in fact some delicious coffee, if not a bit strong. With abnormal speed, Anastasia had finished the first cup and was about to fill a second, when I remembered that we weren't there merely to sip coffee. Well, I knew exactly where and how he wanted me to be. What was there of so important and transformative to tell me apart from a series of meaningless prophecies? A few brief things that I know will be of interest to you. I can guarantee that I will make her precious time worth it. Is there at least something about... I started to ask, unnerved. Once again, she silenced me with a gesture of her hand. It was almost as if there was something magical behind it. Everything has its time. Let's not rush it. Let's start at the beginning as usual. You may not take me seriously at the moment, but eventually you will. Everything I say to you is destined to happen. How I know this is not convenient now for me to know, but even this you will learn at the right time. Pay attention, because I won't be responsible if you don't listen to me. And that was how we began the following dialogue, transcribed how I remember.
As far as I know, I have never slept so well in my entire life as I did that day. Woke up with the sun's rays hitting my face, feeling happy and refreshed as if my happiness had returned all at once after a long period of convalescence. Even if I had inexplicably fallen asleep on Anastasia's chaise longue, I couldn't remember the last time I felt so good about myself, but on the other hand, the girl had most likely thought of a way to tamper with my coffee, and I didn't know whether to thank her or pique her for it. I remember that we had a long conversation throughout the night before I somehow fell asleep, but how all of that applied to me was something that didn't bring me any tangible conclusions then. Being now fully awake, I wanted to demonstrate at least a little politeness by saying good morning to my host. I couldn't even finish the first syllable when I saw that once again I had been the victim of another supernatural trick. The exception of the chaise longue, which remained the only sign that the previous night had not been a mere hallucination. Everything and everyone were gone. As if by magic, overnight, all of that furniture and the huge collection of works of art disappeared, along with the girl and her maid, whom I called several times without being answered by either of them. Looking in fear at my surroundings, the only things I could see were cobwebs and a desolate void. Before I lost what was left of my sanity, I decided to leave that damn place as soon as possible without even looking back. But as I walked to the door, I saw that at least one of the paintings had not been taken. That of the warrior archangel announcing the eschatos with his trumpet. I gazed at it one last time with disgust, while at the same time a strange desire to take it with me crept into my mind. Just in case I left it there, afraid that it would bring worse omens to me. But Anastasia would have the last laugh when, in yet another of her whims, she managed to get a package into my hands through Savitri on the same day in which I was preparing to leave the lands of Bohemia. It was during the early morning hours of the day, 2 days after my affair with Anastasia, that I had arranged my luggage to leave for the last stop on my itinerary. But I couldn't leave without saying goodbye to my innkeeper, the rotund and mustachioed Mr. Tomasz, who, despite everything, had done so much to entertain me. Just as I was about to go and see him, I heard a knock on my bedroom door. I ordered them to come in. It was Mr. Tomasz himself, carrying a package under one of his arms. When he saw me with all my bags back, he asked me, "But are you already planning to leave?" "Unfortunately, yes, Mr. Tomasz. A writer's work is never done." "Why, it's a great shame. I would love for you to stay a little longer. It is rare to receive guests of your caliber. But I'm glad I found you before you were gone. A charming little Indian girl came here and asked me to give you this." And he deposited the rectangular package on my bed. "Is she a friend of yours?" "One could say that," I lied, disturbed. I should have suspected that Anastasia knew where I lived. "I'm glad you managed to make friends here. Even more so, it's such a beautiful girl. Either way, I hope our paths cross again someday. The doors will always be open." He gave me a hug and a handshake, leaving shortly after. As for me, I stared at that package, afraid to open it and more eager to throw it away. But my curiosity ended up getting the better of me, and I decided to tear off its brown paper wrapper and see what else Anastasia had come up with to try and tempt me. It was a painting. That same painting of the archangel with the trumpet. At the time, I thought about cutting it into pieces, throwing it into the fire, and various other ways of destroying and relegating it to oblivion. Today, after my inevitable union with Anastasia, I laughed at my foolishness and show off her painting proudly on the walls of my room. Not only that, but I also kept the note that was attached to the painting, containing only that old word that, for better or for worse, I adopted as the motto of my coat of arms, and which was most likely the word with which God wrote the fiat of my star. The word that, no longer filling my heart with dread, serves as the Atlantean caryatid that supports the mechanisms of my intellect. Villele